Introduce the program formally. My name is Joseph Thomas. I'm the Washington County Democratic Party Chairman. But I'd like to introduce Christian Mitchell. He's the chair of our Strategic Planning Committee and helped organize the
28 minutes.
committee today.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you. Please clap. All right. So, good evening. As Joseph mentioned, my name is Christian Mitchell. I'm chair of the Washington County Democrat Strategic Planning Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's panel discussion. I will be your moderator for this evening. All right. So, before we get started, actually, let's just go. All right. Sorry, I had it. All right. So. The great American philosopher John Dewey opened his 1907 book, The School and Society, with the following observation. What the best and wisest parent wants for his child, that must the community want for all of our children. Any other goal for our schools is narrow and unlovely. Acted upon, it destroys our democracy. Now, Professor Dewey was able to make this connection between the fundamental ethic of democracy and the schoolhouse because he understood that a free society depends on a well-educated populace, and that our system of universal education provided at the public expense is perhaps the single greatest democratic innovation in the history of the American Republic. Now, I would venture that none of us would be here tonight if we didn't, on some level, agree with that sentiment. I would also venture that none of us would be here if we didn't also agree on some level that the school system is in crisis. Now, given the range of political views represented here tonight, I would be surprised if we all agreed on the roots of the crisis or the best ways to address it. But there's still a pervasive sense in the community that whatever the cause, our system is not living up to its potential. So, in the hope of shedding some light on our educational problem, and perhaps more importantly, of getting the perspective of the highly trained and experienced professionals in the field who have to implement whatever solution they settle on, I am pleased to introduce this evening's panelists. Tonight we have Ms. Heather Boyle, president of the Bartlesville Education Association, who teaches first grade at Wayside Elementary. She's been a teacher for 16 years, the last 9 of which have been here at Bartlesville. We also have Ms. Rachel Huff, who teaches 8th grade at Madison Middle School and is president-elect for the BEA. She's currently in her 15th year of teaching and has been with the Bartlesville Public Schools for 10 years. And then last, we have Mr. Brian Davis, who teaches Eastern Hemisphere at Central Middle School, where he's also building coordinator for the Social Studies Department and Science Olympiad co-coach. He has taught for 16 years, the last 6 of which have been here in Bartlesville. Please join me in So before we dive in, just a quick note on format. So I have a series of prepared questions that I'm going to put to our panelists. After we cover those, we'll turn to audience questions. Now, there are at the back of the room, you may have noticed, some cards to write your questions on. If you don't have one, just throw up a hand and Diana or Mark or somebody will get you one with one of our itty-bitty, tiny little uncomfortable pencils to write them down with. And then, once near the end, what I'll do, we'll have everyone who has questions pass them over, pass them up, and then as they're answering the last question, I'll sort them out, and as time permits, we will go through the audience questions. Okay? So, I want to start with something fairly open-ended here. Our goal is to inform the community about what's actually going on in education in Oklahoma. So, if you would, could each one of you, and we'll just kind of start here at the end and work our way down if that works, tell us one thing that you think everybody should know about what's going on in education here in Oklahoma, but don't, and then maybe a little comment on why we should know that, why it's significant. So,
Okay. I believe that the one thing that people don't realize is that it is, this has been going on for 8 years, at least, that they've been cutting education. This is not a new thing. It's not anything that, because of oil prices or because of this or that, this has been going on a long time. I remember in 1990 when the teachers walked out, I was in, I think, 8th grade, and which is what I teach. But anyway, and I remember that and thinking, oh, those poor teachers, and and it got better for a while, but even towards the end of my education in '94, I had already seen as a student. But I think besides the fact that it's been doing that, one thing is the children are painfully aware. They know something's wrong they will even tell you. My 13 and 14-year-olds will say, well, we can't do that because of the budget. And I said, what does that mean? I was like, that means that we don't have any money and we can't do the things that you want us to do because there is no money. And the kids are painfully aware of that. They're like, oh, I wish we could do this, but we know we can't because, well, Mrs. Hepp, you'll have to buy that out of your own pocket. So just so you know, the kids are painfully aware, at least in, at our age.
Teachers are tired. It's a struggle every day.
Can you speak up a little?
Teachers are tired. We have been doing our job, me for 16 years. When I first got in, I walked around the Capitol my junior year with my mom, and 1017 was passed, and that was a big component in me choosing to go into education. In my second year of teaching, I made as much as my mother did as a 20-year teacher. In my second year of teaching, I made as much as, but I chose this career because I knew with 1017, I was going to be able to support myself. I was going to be able to support my family, my future family. And to me, the future looked bright. And I have, over 16 years, slowly seen those protections, the classroom protections, slowly eroded away. State law, ladies and gentlemen, says that an elementary teacher should not have more than 20 students in a classroom. And if she has more than 25, there should be an assistant. When was the last time, Ms. First Grade Teacher, you had less than 20 people?
No.
And when was the last time you had a full-time assistant when it was over that amount? The laws have been rewritten to work all of basically the protections we had under 1017, and the hard-fought gains of those teachers in the 80s and 90s are essentially gone. And we're back to that point where we're tired. I know I have conversations every day with people in my building who are talking about Arkansas, talking about Texas. What else could we do? Because they're tired.
Yes, I would say that we're tired, we're exhausted. I had a coworker today say if my health was tied to the state of public education in my classroom, I would be in ICU on life support. And I thought that's a good visual because we feel like that. We're exhausted, and so many of us are so passionate about public education and about what we do, and we believe in it so strongly and so passionately, yet we have watched over the years, again, those protections under 1017 that slip away because there's little clauses, because I've researched for years, I've taught kindergarten for years, how can I have 25 kids and no assistant? This is not manageable. Well, because if there's little clauses, if you have certain amount of indebtedness, these kind of things, they don't have to honor those. So we're passionate and we're exhausted, and we are watching people in Oklahoma City make decisions on our behalf that we, parents and the general community don't realize as we try to implement some of those things. I feel like we're getting kind of a bad rap because of decisions that are being made on our behalf by the representatives in Oklahoma City. One example would just be the Reading Sufficiency Act, which we can talk about that more later, but basically where third graders have to pass a test on a single day. That's been revamped and reworked, and it's not exactly like that anymore, but that parents don't always understand all that, so it comes down on us what you don't want to be accountable, those kind of things. So anyways, I think we are exhausted, and we're tired of decisions being made by people who have no idea what's really going on in the classroom.
And how it affects us. They really, truly
And
do.
the students.
Yes.
That's what
Test.
it's all about, too,
There we go.
the kids.
Bravo.
Right.
Bravo.
This one's close.
Now, can you hear me okay? All right. Okay, so, and this is related. This is related to,
I think
we were just talking about. But so
We've all heard the news.
Use that. Use that fine. Some of
Okay,
us-
Roger.
Some of us are getting older and we can't hear.
All right. All right, so we've all heard the news that the state of Oklahoma is facing an approximately $1.3 billion budget shortfall in the coming year. If you haven't been paying attention, the state is facing a $1.3 billion budget shortfall, for the record. How has, or do you think will, the state budget crisis affect your classroom? It's related to, I think, some of the things we're talking about.
Gotta use the mic.
Okay, well, it's cutting in and out, so you can go ahead and start.
We just had this meeting in our building, actually yesterday morning. Our district has done a phenomenal job of keeping the cuts from affecting us in the classroom, for the most part. They have kept, compared to other districts, class sizes relatively small. In most areas, our elective teachers are still struggling with class size more than the core teachers. They've done a lot of cuts, especially recently downtown. I'm not at liberty to say the majority of those cuts, but the cuts downtown should save us around $400,000 from what I understand. We have other cuts to teaching staff. My building is losing 3 more this year after losing 2 last year, after losing 2 the year before. So we're down about 7 staff members in the last 3. For next year, we will be down about 7 staff members for the 3 years. My class size has gone from 21, 22, high of 25 to high of 32, and probably averaging about 25 to 27. That's still manageable, but that's only because our district has worked so hard to make sure that has happened. Our fund balance, the district prefers to keep it between 7 and 11%. So that means of the money we get each year, 7 to 11% should be set aside for a rainy day fund, and about half of that is needed to pay for operating expenses for the next year until we get our operating money from the state. So board policy states that should not go below 7%. With our 2 revenue failures, my understanding is including the money anticipated from the rainy day fund, our fund balance is now at 4.5%, which means we essentially do not have a rainy day fund at this point. What we have is enough money, hopefully, barring another revenue failure, to pay our expenses until we get our allocation next year. That's scary to me. That's extremely scary to me. And in my conversations with our individuals in Oklahoma City, I'm not sure the new revenue streams are being looked for hard enough. But to answer the question, my classroom is not being affected because our district administrators are working so hard. I don't know that that's going to happen next year, though.
So when you said cuts downtown, what does that mean?
We have lost
What is downtown?
our district administrative offices, superintendent, assistant superintendent. We have lost three high-level administrators that I'm aware of. I've heard of one more that recently that is retiring, and I believe we're not replacing that position. And then we're also losing 2 secretarial style positions downtown as well. For a district our size, in my opinion, we were already bare bones. We're cutting we're down to the Morrow at this point.
In a conversation I had last week with the new superintendent, Chuck McCulley, he really is committed to trying to make sure that our classrooms don't feel this. And so if they have to take a brunt of it, we say downtown because their offices are downtown. If they have to take the brunt of it there, I think, and they're willing to do that. And I will echo what you said too. I sat through but the board budget meetings last year as president-elect, and it's easy to point fingers in a crisis like this, but really Bartlesville has done an excellent job of maintaining a good fund balance and making sure that we're not feeling it in the classrooms. I will say that I think my classroom will feel it. I think that class sizes in elementary school will get larger, where Wayside is about 24 to 25 in most classes. We're a rather large school. We would not be surprised if those numbers went to 30, which is crazy. Now, nobody has said that. Nobody has said you will have 30 kids, but we start thinking what could really happen. That's a possibility. I think another way that it will affect my classroom is that we're losing some support people that come in and do extra tutoring for kids who are struggling in certain subjects. Right. Learning instructional coaches, those kind of supplementary positions that we count on as classroom teachers. With 25 kids this year, I count on those tutors to come and help those struggling learners because they need the extra support that I can't give them even with 25. When I try to imagine 30 and doing that, it's scary because those kids need that. And you heard me mention before the Reading Sufficiency Act. We have to make sure they're reading on level and able to pass a high-stakes test in 3rd grade, and so the pressure trickles down. Another way is that I will spend even more money out of my pocket for my classroom. Teachers do that all the time anyways. It's a joke when my husband does taxes and he hands me the receipts and he can deduct. I don't even know if we get it anymore, but it used to be $200 or $250, and I would spend 4 times that or more on things that I needed for my classroom. And as a businessman, he'd always say, I just can't imagine hiring somebody and then having them go buy their own staples. But teachers are just kind of used to doing that because we need those things for our kids. So I see that happening. Also, our buildings get a per pupil expenditure for each building, and that has been cut every year. This year, I think they took another $5 per pupil. I tried to find out what the per pupil was before, but nobody was exactly sure. But that's huge, and so that comes down. So if I can order $200 worth of supplies out of that budget each year, it's kind of been shrinking. So this year I think I got $125, and that's not enough construction paper and handwriting paper, the things that I need for my class. So copies come out of that too, and we get a little sheet that says you've made your allotment of copies, and what are you supposed to? We just keep copying anyways and hope that. And in our building, we're lucky to have a parent support group that really will pick up some of that, but other buildings aren't as lucky to have that. So those are ways that will personally affect my classroom.
To echo what Brian said, over at Madison in the past 3 years, they will have, starting next year, they will have cut 7 positions as well. So between 2 middle schools, that's 14 positions in 3 years that have been cut. It's already starting to trickle down in my particular building, but also, as what Heather said, we would be nothing without our parent support group. Things would be a lot worse. They have been able to come in and help. I mean, we were to the point with copies and with copy repair. We could have never made it to this end of this school year had it not been for our parent support group. In addition, though, as far as I see in my room, it's going to get larger. Not a whole lot larger, but even the core classes, I've been told, will get larger because we have gotten rid of those positions. The kids, I keep going back to that, but they need what they need. And, someone says, well, I pay taxes, and yes, you do, and so do I. And in fact, one of my paychecks every, year goes to my property taxes. So then in addition to that, I can't, my husband finally had the discussion with me, so we can't keep doing this.
because I'm already funding so many things. Like with science right now, we have to buy all of our own supplies to fill in for the labs in order to have the kids to do the labs. We have to. And we do, because that's who we are, especially the dedicated ones, such as myself and other people in my building. We do it. But I think that there is going to be a point where I'm not going to be able to do that anymore. I can't, because I don't know about you guys, but it feels like sometimes you have to sacrifice your own family for the children that you teach. And so we're getting to that point where I won't be able to do that either. And then where are we? Because we can't make copies, so we can't do anything that involves that. We won't be able to buy additional supplies. And so, we're thankful, at least in science, that we have newer textbooks, but really the true learning is hands-on and being able to do activities and go places and have the children experience things. And when you can't do that, our principal, Joey Edson, told me today, I said, do you have any comments, that you would like for me to echo? And he said, we are past bare bones. Just like Brian said, we're to the marrow. And downtown at the ESC, they have been nothing but supportive. A lot of times people try to say, oh, it's the district. No, it's not. It's the state. It's the people that we have elected down in Oklahoma City, and some of us chose not to elect them, but that's the problem down there.
Well, all right then, but none of them showed up. We had sent a courtesy invitation to Reps Dunlap and Sears and Senator Ford or whatnot. It's session, there's a lot going on. They're,
Yeah, we're waiting on the next election.
I didn't say that. All right. So if we can shift gears just a little bit. So it's interesting you guys have been talking about having to sort of do more with less. One of the big things in the past few years, we've seen several shifts in state education standards. Past standards, common core. I can't even keep track of it, and I principally try to follow this stuff, right? So first, there seems to be in the popular discussion about standards some confusion about what educational standards are for, what they do, how they operate, that thing. So if and maybe just one of you, I don't know that all three of you need to explain what the standards are, but I'm curious if you can explain what education standards mean to you as a teacher, that is how they figure into your work. And then what do you guys have to do, maybe some concrete examples from each of you, or just kind of as here, what you had to do when it changed and then changed changed again, So if we could, yes, Brian.
First of all, standards are essentially our roadmap. Basically, this is what the state says a seventh grader needs to know in Eastern Hemisphere geography. Then it's my job to go find resources and material that will allow the students to internalize those objectives. It's that simple. Ours are due to be rewritten in, I believe, the next year. I don't anticipate large shifts in our Eastern Hemisphere objectives because we had a massive shift about 3 or 4 years ago. We have not been caught up in the Common Core Oklahoma academic standards debacle because our standards were set in 2012 and we've been using the same standards since. I will tell you as a teacher, when you get a new set of standards though, it is essentially a 3-year process to really hone in a set of standards. The first year, you are learning the standards yourself. You are researching material. You are digging deep in all these crevices to find what you can use to teach that standard. The second year, you're evaluating what you did the first year. That didn't work. Let's go find something different. Oh, this was beautiful, but let's add this and this. And the third year is when you really start hitting your stride. Now let me tell you why that's a big deal and partially why we're so tired. We spent 3 years ramping up for Common Core. Common Core is coming. We're going to be teaching Common Core. I myself spent over 30 hours in training to be ready for Common Core. I had my Common Core standards ready to go. I had my Common Core assessments ready to go. In the 12th hour, small pockets of people said Common Core bad. They were loud and vocal, and all of a sudden, for various reasons, Common Core went away. Well, let's go back to PASS. Well, we saw Common Core and we found the value in it, and now you told us the Common Core was superior to PASS, and now you're telling us to go back to PASS. Well, I will tell you, a lot of teachers did not go completely back to PASS. They did pass they did their pass for pacing and what was going to talk when, but they still used a lot of those Common Core strategies that they spent 3 years learning to do. Now we have a new set, Oklahoma Academic Standards, and all of a sudden, in the 12th hour, all of a sudden these aren't good enough? Well, these were written by Oklahomans, for Oklahoma, with more input from stakeholders than any other objectives that have ever been passed. Every step along the way, they were approved. And we let outside forces come in, 2 people from out of state, not Oklahomans, come in and tell us that our standards were subpar, after we had already vetted them with every important organization within the state. And now we're letting those groups disrupt them. I do believe that they were passed Monday, but we had to fight for our own objectives that we had passed. And once again, that's why we're tired. That's something we shouldn't have to fight about. That's not something we should have had to worry about. That's something that we should have just glided on through, and without me having to contact my legislature 10 times in 2 weeks to make sure that they were on board.
I'm going to add something because there's always tends to be a lot of confusion about the difference between standards and curriculum. They are not the same thing. And hopefully all of you in this room know that, but if you don't, I will share. I brought a copy of a few of the standards that we use now in first grade. They're simple things like first graders should add and subtract within 10. That's a math standard. First graders should be able to tell the who, what, when, where, why of a story. Those are standards. The curriculum are the things that the district and the teacher pull together to actually teach those standards. And sometimes there's a lot of confusion. You'll see on Facebook, this came out of a Common Core textbook. Well, it might have been aligned with Common Core, and there are certainly some really cruddy textbooks out there, and those are more local decisions, and teachers gather the materials that they need. So I just want to clarify that, because sometimes even amongst the groups that are kind of fighting or were against Common Core and then the new standards, I feel like sometimes they're confused about what a standard is and what curriculum is. So I have standards. If anybody later wants to look at what a standard actually is, you're welcome to. We think the new standards are fantastic. Most of us followed them being written. There were opportunities for teachers to review them, to give their feedback. I think people were upset at one point because they didn't actually say anything about Oklahoma in them. Well, it's math. There's not really going to be a specific way in Oklahoma that you teach math differently than somewhere else. Same things they wanted exemplars for literature, which, list of standard literature that each, well,